Today, during a press briefing in Finland, President Biden was asked about Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich. Gershkovich, an American, has been detained in Russia for more than 3 months. This is what President Biden said.
Oh, I'm serious about prisoner exchange. I'm serious about doing all we can to free Americans who are being illegally held in Russia or anywhere else for that matter. And that process is underway.
Well, that's great news. We want Gershkovich home yesterday. And just like I wanted WNBA star player Brittany Griner home. And to show you how important that was to me, just consider this. I did at least 21 segments right here on this show about Russia detaining her. That's a lot of segments. But I covered her detention so much because Russia holding Americans is that serious. President Biden made it happen. He got Griner home. She came home after nearly 10 months in a Russian detention. Listening to the president today, I'm also confident he's going to bring reporter Gershkovich home. But what about fellow American Jimmy Wilgus? Jimmy who? Yep, that's my point. Jimmy who? At the White House, it is Jimmy who? I don't think the Biden administration knows who he is. But you know about Jimmy because you watch The Record. This news show has reported many times about Jimmy Wilgus being held in a Russian prison. He's been in a Russian prison since November 2016. That's 2 years before the American-Canadian Paul Whelan was detained in Russia, who the administration has, by the way, mentioned. Jimmy has been laboring in a Mordovia labor camp for longer than both athlete Griner and reporter Gershkovich combined. Let me repeat. I wanted Griner home, and I want Gershkovich home yesterday. But it is deeply disturbing to me, and it should be to you, that so far the Biden administration has done zero for Jimmy Wilgus and his family. Zero. The Wilgus family and their dedicated publicity team that works pro bono to bring Jimmy home have never heard from the White House. Nothing. Now consider this, a major contrast. Griner was detained in February 2022. Just a few months later, President Biden spoke over the phone to Griner's wife, Sherelle. 2 months later, in September, President Biden spoke to Sherelle in person at the White House. That's 2 direct contacts in 6 months. President Biden did the same for Paul Whelan's family. But for the Wilgus family, nothing. It's been nearly 7 years, silence. Listen again to what President Biden said today.
Oh, I'm serious about prisoner exchange. I'm serious about doing all we can to free Americans who are being illegally held in Russia or anywhere else for that matter. And that process is underway.
I beg to differ regarding Jimmy Wilgus, our fellow American. President Biden is not serious about getting Jimmy home. There is no process underway for Jimmy's freedom. Consider this. 2 months ago, in May, U.S. Ambassador to Russia, Lynn Tracy, visited Canadian-American Paul Whelan in his Russian prison. That's the same Russian prison where Jimmy Wilgus is. In fact, they both sleep in the same building. But guess who the U.S. Ambassador did not meet with that day? You guessed it, Jimmy. I tweeted about it, hoping to get attention from the White House for Jimmy. It's obvious from my tweet and our extensive coverage of Jimmy, Griner, and Gershkovich that here on The Record, we don't discriminate or pick or choose which Americans we want to help get home. I'm not so sure about the White House. Jimmy is so desperate for help that he called me from his prison cell in Russia with a personal plea to President Biden. He asked me to record his plea. I did. And to air it. I did. I aired all of it on June 29th. Jimmy hoped the president or his staff might respond. Here's part of Jimmy's plea.
Imagine what it's like to be me, an American in Russia, tricked into signing a concession, tried behind closed doors, denied basic rights, and imprisoned with failing health, unattended. I call on President Biden to designate me wrongfully detained and bring me home.
So far, no response. So after almost 7 years in a Russian prison, why at the White House and with President Biden is it still Jimmy who? You and I both know why. Because unlike WNBA star Griner and reporter Gershkovich, Jimmy doesn't have a powerful constituency that the White House wants to curry favor with. Griner had the WNBA and other supporters, and Gershkovich, while very unlucky to be in a Russian prison right now, is lucky to work for a powerful national news organization, the Wall Street Journal. What candidate during an election cycle, including President Biden, wants to be accused of ignoring a major news organization's reporter held overseas, right? You also may have heard about Gershkovich on other networks because, frankly, We journalists, we can be thick as thieves, meaning we rally around the flag for each other and support each other. But in doing so, sometimes we forget those who are not one of us, journalists. Jimmy doesn't have a powerful constituency. It's just Jimmy and two elderly parents. They do not own a team like the WNBA. They don't run a news organization. Jimmy is not a big sports figure. He's not a journalist. But you know what? He's one of us. He's an American. He's an American musician who was in a band writing and making music in Russia. Jimmy Wilgus needs to come home too, yesterday.